Hey guys, this is MC Joe D with the Roundhouse Report. I'm bored, so I wanted to make I'm going to try and make it quick. A little bit of synopsis of what's going on in Israel vis-a-vis the Gaza war. Uh, I have to date this because everything could change in like 2 hours. So today is Saturday, May 4th. It's 11:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, what we're going to talk about is Rafah. Rafah. At the beginning, Rafah is the southernmost city in the Gaza Strip, and it borders Egypt. And a lot of aid flows through that. Now, when Israel first started the ground incursion, they started from the north, and they told the citizens, millions, like 1 million people in Gaza City, go south toward the Wadi. The Wadi is a river that separates the top third of Gaza from the rest of Gaza. So they said, go past the Wadi. All right, they did. And then Israel finished up in Gaza and they moved out and they then attacked across the Wadi River and they went into Khan Yunis. Khan Yunis is a major bastion for Hamas fighters. So at that point, they were told, look, go south again while we operate in Rafah. Khan Yunis. Okay. Well, now they're at the very bottom of the country, of territory, Gaza. They're at the very bottom. They have nowhere to go, which is actually not true. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, okay? There are 2 IDF divisions that are waiting for deployment into Rafah. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has said, even if we make a deal with Hamas, which would be 33 Israeli hostages, 1,000 Gazan terrorists, murderers, whatever you want to call them, and in exchange there would be a 40-day ceasefire. Netanyahu said, with or without a deal, with or without, we will invade Rafah, which is the last redoubt. That's the last stronghold that Hamas has. It's in the very bottom of Rafah. They've been crumpled up. Now, what they have there is about 5 brigades, and by their standards of a brigade or a battalion, it's 1,000 troops. They started out with 24 battalions or brigades. It's interchangeable the way they talk about the Hamas military structure. So I'm just going to call them brigades. So there's about 1,000 to 1,500 in each brigade. There were 24 to begin with. 19 have been destroyed. So there's several more that need to be knocked out. They're all in Rafah. And these are the guys that have fought. They fought in the north, they fought in the center in Khan Yunis, and they pulled back. These are probably the most fanatical Hamas fighters or ideologues out of all the rest of them. This is the last batch. And they're, Yahya Sinwar, by the way, he was released in 2014 in a hostage deal to get back the remains of an Israeli soldier's body. And they released him, and guess what? He is in charge of Hamas. So they're trying to find Yahya Sinwar. But, it's very... I don't know what to say about Yahya Sinwar. They're trying to kill him, but he's immersed in these tunnel systems and underneath Rafah. Again, there's a massive tunnel system in Rafah, and not only is the tunnel system moving through Gaza to the north, the main problem with the Gazan tunnels on the border with Egypt is let me think here a second. All right, so 5 brigades or battalions, however you want to call them, because Hamas has just is interchangeable. There's about 4 or 5 left in Rafah. They've all been, the other 19 have been dismantled. The backbone has been crushed. They've defeated them as an effective fighting force. So you have 5 to 8,000 battle hardened, ideologically driven to the extreme Hamas soldiers. This is very similar to the end of World War II when the SS units in the German military, the guys who were responsible for the commandants in these concentration camps, were all SS. But in terms of the Wehrmacht and the actual fighting on the ground, the SS were fanatical units. They were fanatical. And that's kind of what I'm getting from these last units that are in Rafah from these Hamas guys. Like, they're the most hardcore dudes. They're ready to go down. Okay. So regarding the tunnels that I was just talking about that lead from Egypt into into Gaza for Hamas, they are probably the most extensive, like, dug in. Again, it's from Egypt to Gaza, so like they're on the other side of the border. It's one of them. That is the main way they get weapons, money, material from Iran, and I'll tell you why. The main smuggling route, in order to get to Egypt. Now, Egypt has a problem with its own Islamist extremists, namely the Muslim Brotherhood. So Iran taught Hamas and their cohorts how to make these missiles indigenously in Sudan. Now, currently, Sudan is going in the middle of a war. Apparently, I saw a couple of headlines. They're in the middle of a war. There's famine. There's dehydration. No one's talking about that. They don't care. They just want to talk about things that get them ratings. So the main smuggling routes that go underneath the Egyptian border into Gaza, that's how they get their material for war. That's how they get those rockets. That's how, and how do I put this? They make the weapons in Sudan, they move them into Egypt, and then they move them into the tunnels. That's how it's set up. Sudan, with the Iranians are there, they have material from Iran, they're making their thing. So they're there, and this has been going on for a long time. I mean, even bin Laden was based in Sudan before he moved to Afghanistan. 20 years, 30 years ago. Now, this was an interesting story. Do you remember a few months ago when 3 Israeli hostages managed to escape and they were killed by the IDF accidentally? Well, I just saw one of my sources talking about how her daughter, or I'm sorry, her son, who was in his early 20s, was captured by Hamas on October 7th, and he managed to get out of their captivity, and he spent 5 days roaming around Gaza City trying to find the IDF. Now, you tell me, that might make a very interesting movie. Now, the thing about this kid is he had like fiery red blonde hair, and you're not fitting into Gaza with that. So I have no idea what his 5 days were like, but he evaded, he broke out, he evaded, he waited 5 days, he was listening for Israeli tanks, he was listening for Israeli movement on the ground, for, you know, I don't know what he did, but what he should have done is, once he found them, dropped to his knees and put his hands up. But apparently he was so excited and full of adrenaline and desperation, apparently he rushed the Israeli position and they shot him. But I wanted to add that in because that was kind of an interesting, he spent 5 days on the run in Hamas with red hair, or in Gaza with red hair. Now, There's been a massive there's about pre-war, I believe, 3 to 800,000 people lived in Rafah. Now there's over 1.5 million because everyone's been pushed south. And so the Israelis have set up partition zones, safe zones, north and south of Rafah, and also north toward Khan Yunis. So they're building these massive tent cities because they're not going to invade Rafah with 1.5 million civilians there. As relative to Gaza City, it's a pretty small city. So they're finally setting these tents up. They're finally getting these different agencies, these non-government organizations, these NGOs to get these tents up, get these guys, get these refugees out of Rafah. But the problem is, though, it's going to take a recent commentator that I watched said it's going to take months to get 1.5 million civilians out of Rafah into one of these encampment areas. Well, crap. Israel's been, I don't know if this is because of the Biden administration's pressure or if there is some kind of an Israeli tactic that I'm not simply aware of, or a strategy. But they've had 3 months to move these people out of Rafah, and they didn't do it. Smells kind of fishy. Now, at the same time, Egypt is preparing. They threw up 30-foot blast walls along their entire border with Gaza. They've moved armored heavy divisions to the border with Gaza. They don't want any because they are, like I said, they have a problem with the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood is directly connected and helps fund Hamas and Islamic Jihad. The last thing that Egypt wants is for more freaking terrorists to get into Egypt who are going to plot and just cause trouble. They don't want that, and I don't blame them. But they kind of see the writing on the wall, where it kind of like the U.S. border with Mexico, where you see like hundreds of these guys rush the border and they get over and it turns into a stampede. Well, it's kind of something like that is what the Egyptians are fearing, is there's going to be just an overwhelming amount of momentum people desire to get out of Rafah. They're going to move south. Like I said, the Egyptians put some armored divisions on the border. They put up 30-foot blast walls along the entire border. But at the same time, they have partitioned off 13,000 acres so as to make temporary encampments. So that says that if it comes down to it, they'll let them in. But they don't want to. Okay. So Israel's late response doesn't make any sense. It's going to take them weeks and weeks to get these guys out of Rafah. And they've had 3 months, so I don't understand that. What would an operation look like in Rafah? It's going to look exactly like Gaza City. It's going to look exactly like Khan Yunis. I'm running out of time, so I can't really speak much to it. But street-to-street fighting, kicking in doors, just look up what they've done in Khan Yunis and Gaza, and that's what they're going to do in Rafah. What would it accomplish? Well, it would destroy the remaining 4 or 5 brigades of Hamas. I mean, they're an army, you know. It would knock out those 5,000 troops or so. And then from there, they can keep mopping up. And the theory is that any hostages that are still alive is with Yahya Sinwar, the commander of Hezbollah or Hamas on the ground in Israel. Yahya Sinwar, and again, he was released. He was a prisoner, and they released him. But this is the problem. The mission invading Rafah would take care of a lot of things. It would destroy the rest of Hamas's ability to make war. You want to degrade them to the point where they're, instead of at 100% capacity per battalion, per 1,000 troops, they're at 25% capacity, which means you can't make war anymore. I think what ultimately is going to happen, you guys have probably heard this, is that Hamas might be defeated on the battlefield, but their ideology won't. I agree. I agree. If you're a 5-year-old kid and your parents get bombed, that's awful. That's awful. But because of Hamas's use of civilian infrastructure, hospitals, schools, these things are happening. And that 5-year-old, I don't know, if I was 5-year-old, when I was 5, if something like that were to happen to my parents, I'd be, that would lodge, you're developing your brain at that point. That would lodge in there. So the ideology won't be destroyed regarding Hamas. But what I do think is we're going to see, an insurgency movement on par with, say, the Taliban versus the United States and Afghanistan. IEDs, ambushes, things like this. Because Hamas, when it's all said and done, even if those final battalions are destroyed, they're just going to, the remaining ones are just going to take off the uniforms, and they're going to wait to make ambushes. They're going to place IEDs. They're going to be an insurgent group, like what we fought in Afghanistan. So let me look at my notes, make sure I got everything. So yeah, you're a little kid, you see your parents get killed, you see a vivid image of your brother or sister being killed, or your son, your daughter being killed, and there is, in some sects of Islamic law, so this was especially true in Afghanistan in the 70s when the Soviet Union invaded them, that if you fought, you would basically, if, say, your uncle was killed in an airstrike by the Russians, there's a culture in certain Islamic sects that say, okay, your family was killed, you have an obligation to pick up arms and go fight on behalf of whoever was killed. And this is one of the reasons Russia was so heavy-handed in the Afghan war. That's one of the reasons why so many people in Afghanistan fought against them, is because they're like, you're killing my brother. I'm duty-bound to pick up arms. I'm getting way off topic. I was just trying to say that it'll probably look, the aftermath of the war will probably look like something like the Taliban in Afghanistan while we were there. So I hope you guys like it. Leave me some comments, give me some likes, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. All right, take it easy.